Welcome to the Hilaritas Press Podcast, where we explore the vast world of Robert Anton Wilson. In today's exclusive interview, guest host Zach West chats with returning guest David J. Brown and his Mavericks of the Mind and Voices from the Edge co-interviewer Rebecca Novick in their first podcast together. I really enjoyed this wide-ranging discussion on consciousness, lucid dreaming, deja vu, and more. And you can check out my previous interview with David in episode 40. Meanwhile, Hilaritas has just re-released Wilson's first published book, the long out-of-print Book of Forbidden Words. Head over to wherever you buy books and check it out. And so, right here, right now, it's my great pleasure to share with you Zach's conversation with Rebecca and David.
All right, well, welcome, David J. Brown and Rebecca Novick. So glad to have you. I feel very fortunate to be able to talk to you both today about your book, Mavericks of the Mind and Beyond. Yeah, I got my copy right here. I've been loving it. I'm not finished. It's a pretty big one, but I've been kind of skipping around, seeing where intuition sort of leads me. But how are you both doing today?
Doing
Great.
great.
Thank you.
Great. Wonderful to be here.
Happy to
Great
be
to see
here.
you. Great to see you again.
Great to see you. And Rebecca, since this is your first time, I would love to hear sort of like who you are, where you've been, and maybe what has got you to this moment and what you've been doing since Mavericks of the Mind came out.
Well, just first of all, I'll just say hi to Dave because I very rarely get to speak to him, and it's so nice. And this is actually the first podcast that we've done together, which is just so cool. So gosh, who am I? Well, I'm pretty much the same person as I was when I did this book. I mean, essentially, I don't think I've changed. Obviously, a lot has happened, and I've had quite an eclectic life, I would say. I got interested in I did continue to do interviewing in various forms. I did radio for a few years for a nonprofit in LA, and then I did a lot of interviewing for various human rights groups and for documentaries and media in the human rights area. So that was quite a different kind of interviewing torture survivors and people who had undergone extreme hardship. But also doing interviews, doing oral history projects with older people who are keeping, like older Tibetans who are keeping traditions alive and things like that. And so I've always really enjoyed the interview process. I trained as a yoga teacher, so I've been doing that for some time. I've stayed very interested in different spiritual paths. I've just been always very interested in spirituality and its and consciousness. So that's just stayed. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure that I've actually changed that much in it essentially in terms of who I am. I just kind of approach life in a certain way. But I would say that that at this point I have kind of feel like in some ways come full circle and really settled into kind of a sense of my relationship with the universe in a very different way. I think before it was very much a kind of slightly dilettante, kind of new agey, kind of a bit all over the place, very innocent and naive, and that was the nature of the project. It had its own beauty in that, a little bit of hubris and chutzpah combined. And I think now the kind of dust has settled in a lot of that, and I feel like uh, I don't know, it's finally all the big lessons are finally kind of sinking in, at last, which is really interesting. And yeah, so that's kind of, I don't know if that's a biography, but that's kind of where I feel at the
Yeah, I
moment.
think it definitely lets us get to know you a little bit. And David, I would love you to tell us maybe the story, like how you two met and maybe how the book came about.
Story of how I first met Rebecca. Well, it happened as a result of um, a young woman that I picked up hitchhiking when I was after I printed out the final chapter of my book Brainchild, my first book. I was driving back from UC Santa Cruz campus, and I picked up a young woman who was hitchhiking at the time, and she rushed into my car and said, "Have you ever seen a four-leaf clover?" And she was holding in her hands this four-leaf clover, and we began talking, and after we spoke for quite after a couple of hours, actually, we ended up hanging out. He said, "You have to meet my friend Beck. You guys would just, you guys would totally hit it off. You'd have so much in common to talk about, and you just have to meet Beck." And then around 2 weeks later, I was in the bookshop Santa Cruz, and we was just casually walking around looking at books. And I started talking to this woman there. And I can't remember what we were talking about, but we got into some kind of lively conversation about something about maybe the books that we were looking at. And at some, when I asked her name, and she said her name was Beck. And I said, "Beck? You're not the Beck that my friend Biana told me about." She goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'm friends with Biana." And so it was this kind of strange synchronicity that I ended up meeting her, by chance. Then 2 weeks after I was told about her,
Mm.
and we became very good friends at the time, and we started having a lot of philosophical discussions about the nature of reality and what happens to consciousness after death. And questions like that, especially late at night, getting stoned and on various different psychedelic compounds, and we love to discuss these ideas. And one night we just got this audacious inspiration that, wouldn't it be wonderful to ask some of the great minds, the great thinkers on the planet, the people whose books we had been reading, what they thought about these questions. I mean, um, most interviews really that people do, they focus on, current events or what people are currently working on, and very rarely do they discuss deep philosophical questions like what is God, what is the nature of reality, what happens to us after we die. And we thought that would be just a wonderful adventure to be able to ask all these people. And we did have some contacts at the time. We knew people that knew Terence McKenna and Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson and people like that. So, we that was the inspiration. We took it to heart, and we began our adventure.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like in that first meeting of Dave, it was just instantaneous, like there he is. There's the guy I can talk to about all this crazy stuff that's going on in my head. And the thing is that we would bring stuff out in each other that was so cool. Like one of us would have a seed of an idea and the other person would start to water it, and
Mhm.
and it would, and then then it would start to grow, and then like a flower would come in, like, okay, and what about this one? And it was kind of like sort of gardening of the mind. It was just so much fun. And I mean, all credit to Dave, and he's the one who had the connections. But yeah, it was just so fun, the collaboration, and it was the first sort of real um, exciting collaboration I'd ever entered into, and it's always something that it's so rare, Zach. I don't know if you've experienced that, to have a collaboration that just really works.
Mhm.
And there is some, like, have you heard the concept of the third mind?
Mhm.
When two people are getting together and you're just vibing on a very high level, and there's something they call the third mind, that something seems to sort of enter the room as a third kind of consciousness. And that used to happen quite regularly with Dave and I don't know if you remember that. It was almost like another consciousness would
Yes.
enter the room, and we'd be sort of kind of aware of it, And yeah, and so lots of great ideas. And then it was just such an honor to be able to go and talk to these people. And to be honest,
Mm.
at the time, a lot of it went over my head. Like I look back now and I go, oh my God, it was just amazing. I just had, now that person is such a legend. I think at the time I didn't realize like quite how influential these people were to become. People like Terence McKenna. I mean, you had a feeling about him, right? But looking back, I think, wow, that was just amazing, that I had that opportunity. So
Yeah, what a beautiful experience and so awesome like that. When you do meet someone like that, it's very cool. Now, I was wondering if do you feel like the male-female perspective had anything to do with it, or was it just happened to meet another person? Do you feel like that had something to do with the way you interviewed together or not?
Yeah, I think absolutely. We got asked that question a lot when we were doing the interviews, and what was so interesting about what we would do to prepare for each interview is we would read the books and the works of the people that we were going to interview in great depth, and we both brainstormed independently first and tried to come up with an independent set of questions. And each time we both thought that we had, covered the entire spectrum of what you could possibly ask this person. And then when we got together to discuss, the order and, how we were going to sequence the actual interview, we were both astonished to discover that our list of questions was almost entirely unique, that there
Mm.
was very little overlap really between, and we attributed this to male, female perspectives as well as, we came from different cultural backgrounds as well. Rebecca being from England and me being from New Jersey, but it was remarkable how well we were able to play off each other and how well it integrated. There was sort of this greater whole that was created through the combination of our two contributions.
yeah, I'm not sure that I ever thought that it was about the male-female perspective. I just felt it was like, you know, Dave's perspective and my perspective. It was just two, individual different body mind units coming at it with our, as Dave said, our different histories and our different perspectives. But then, like looking through the questions, I think if you didn't know who was the guy and who was the girl, I think you probably figure it out actually. Because I think I probably asked more touchy-feely questions, I would think. You tell us, Zach, when you finished reading the book.
Yeah, I think I tend to focus more on technology. I remember that was
Yes,
that
yes.
was
And the future. Yeah,
yeah.
you're always asking about the future. I don't think I hardly ever ask about that. Yeah.
Yeah, Rebecca, from memory, it seemed to be a lot more like environmental, if I remember, like environmental causes, and then consciousness. So the first
Yeah.
one I'd like to ask you, and I ask in a specific way, because to get rid of the word is, as a fan of Robert Anton Wilson, I would love to say for each of you, like, what is your relationship with the word consciousness?
Well, consciousness. Gosh, now we're getting to the easy questions now. So, that's a question I've been exploring my whole life. That I've been very fascinated with who I am at my deepest core. I began meditating when I was a young teenager, and I just meditated right before I got ready for this podcast today. So I've been exploring. The alterations in consciousness through psychedelics, and what is consciousness? I mean, it's the great mystery. It's the thing that's the most mundane and the most mysterious aspect of who we are. um I'm not sure I really have a good answer for that question, though. I just know that it's something that I love to explore. The different ways that consciousness can be altered, and the great frontiers that they open up for us. I think that throughout the evolution, throughout our biological evolution, consciousness has been expanding and growing and coming together in different ways, and where it's going is anyone's guess.
Mm.
I'm not sure I really answered that question very well, but so what's going through my head as you asked the question.
Definitely think it's a place to start. Rebecca, what would you say?
Well, I think it's funny. I think this is like karma coming around, isn't it? Because we asked everybody this question, and now we're like, oh, hmm, what is consciousness? Oh well, um, I don't know. I could probably just start saying something, and probably disagree with myself halfway through, but. I think at this point, I'm kind of, it's more like, because it's such a huge question, it's like the fish describing the water, you know? Like Dave said, it's so mundane, but at the same time, it's such a mystery. And it's so much a part of, as I'm speaking now, then I need consciousness to be able to have the self-awareness to answer your question. And at the same time, part of me is scanning for something smart to say or whatever, you know. But I think we all have this kind of witness consciousness, this capacity, and you become very aware of this on psychedelics, I think, where you have this kind of consciousness that's kind of like the witness that's sort of just observing everything else. And I think that is the consciousness that I feel that I've been I was going to say working with, but that's not really exactly what it is, but just more um, um, becoming more associated with, I think, in
Mm.
that sense of hanging out in that space, because it's such a sane space and the world is going so crazy. So sort of developing that witness consciousness it just seems to be a very uh, a very kind of uh, sane and positive kind of path to go on. And because it keeps you from getting like too attached or too taken in by things, which is so easy to do. So it keeps, it keeps that perspective, and it's really helpful for others if people are going through a hard time to be able to maintain that consciousness too, and to be able to even perhaps help others to develop that. And I think that it sort of paves the way for higher consciousness to develop, if you see what I mean, to be able to have that ability to kind of witness what's going on from a meta level. I mean, you can still be kind of parts of you can still be kind of freaking out a little bit, but to always maintain that kind of witness level, that's kind of a link between the sort of the individual ego and sort of the more divine state, if that makes any kind of sense at all. That's kind of the way I see it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is slippery to
I
talk
could just,
about.
if I could just add, I mean, it's basically the sense of self that we find, behind our eyes, between our ears, that creates subjective awareness. And in normal states of consciousness, we feel like that's where it's located, inside our head, right behind our eyes. And then in expanded states of consciousness, like when you do a psychedelic, it feels like the whole order of it switches, where
Mm.
suddenly consciousness becomes the room or the universe, and you feel like your brain or your body is inside your mind or inside your consciousness. So there's this kind of shift, and it's very literal when people say the expansion of consciousness, because they mean expanding beyond your brain or expanding beyond your body into other dimensions of reality.
I like the expansiveness and that the idea that consciousness isn't necessarily tied to the body. Well, so I asked myself when I was reading the book, I asked myself that question, just like, well, what do I think consciousness is, or what's my relationship with it? And kind of I don't know if it's like remedial or what, but I kind of came up with it's like conscious plus unconscious would be consciousness. Like, and then I got into ideas like, well, if you remember a dream and you remember something that you did in waking life, the vantage point that you have while you're remembering it, it all seems like the same. And so almost like we upload our observations and our awareness into a sort of cloud, maybe, and that we can, and that having a memory is picking from that. But that would be sort of the way consciousness might behave or come into life. And that part of it is, like you were saying, part of it is just the life process, I think, is part of what consciousness seems like. But it's also the ability to change the way you see things, so that seeing things stone sober, or seeing things stoned, or seeing things on mushrooms, witnessing, it's all different. And so that's altering consciousness in a way as well.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only consciousness we could ever really know is our own. We just infer that other people are conscious. I mean, it's been a big question I've been asked in a lot of podcasts lately about whether, AI can be conscious, or whether the DMT entities are conscious, and I mean, I don't even know that you're conscious right now. I mean, I'm just inferring it, just it's a leap of faith, really. I mean, for many years, people didn't even think other animals were conscious. They thought they were just, automatons. So, I mean, we never really know. There's no scientific measure of consciousness. There's no way to, to measure it with a scientific instrument. So all we can do is just infer it. But my hunch is that the universe is composed of consciousness. That that's all it is. That, that consciousness didn't evolve from matter, but that matter evolved from consciousness. It was the other way around. I see the universe as kind of one big mind, and that the whole, cosmos, all the planets, the stars, biological evolution evolved out of consciousness first. But that's just my hunch. Who knows?
It's good to have hunches. Yeah.
As Robert Anton Wilson used to say, I don't have any expectations, or I don't really know what's real, but I have many suspicions.
Yeah. Well, and it's why I like to add in the word relationship too. I like that I feel like consciousness might be part relationship, part relating to the other, whatever you find that to be. And you mentioned AI. I wonder if we could bring in sort of how you feel like the evolution of consciousness and technology, or the evolution of human consciousness and technology, go together, if they do.
I think undoubtedly so. This was actually, Rebecca and I co-hosted an event at UCLA called Techno and Psyche, where that was the main theme, was how technology has influenced consciousness. I think that the evolution of technology has unquestionably had a huge effect on the way that consciousness is expressed, and where it's heading. Um, I'm not really sure though, how, if it really affects the essence of consciousness. I think consciousness is the subjective awareness behind everything, and I'm not sure that technology really changes that, but it changes how consciousness is expressed.
Mhm. Well, and then I wonder, because technology has changed sort of drastically since the 1993 edition of the book, and the 2010 edition even. I guess the 2010 edition would have been like right after screen cell phones came out, quite a year, right? So it would have been right about right when that was happening. And now with AI and virtual reality, and um, it's drastically changed. But like, I feel like you're saying that um, on on a whole, we're kind of still the same sort of people, kind of monkeying around with all the tools that we have.
Yeah, I
It's
think
very
that's
funny because on the at the Techno and Psyche event, I think it was um who is it? It was Timothy Leary who was talking about you know that there's thousands of young people on these electronic bulletin boards. And I was messaging Dave saying, do you think we should asterisk this and explain what an electronic bulletin board is? Because anybody under I think anyone under 40 is not going to have a clue what that is even referring to. So it is extraordinary. I mean, this is like, yeah, you're before the personal computer, really, or most people had personal computers. I mean, I think we got a personal computer in, and we had computers, but the internet, we were just using them as sort of like glorified typewriters really for a while. And then, so it was around 1995, I think. I'm trying to remember when I first kind of got online. And I remember actually Biana, the same girl who introduced us, right, who was a very, very close friend and a family member by that time. That's another story. Um, but she came down to visit us, and she saw that like AOL thing going around, and she said, "This is never going to catch on." I'll never forget that comment. I thought it was great because we were kind of early adopters, my husband and I, and you know, she was like, "This is never going to catch on. No one's ever going to like sit and watch this thing go round and round." But yeah, I mean that whole I feel so privileged to have had half my life before the internet. I think it's so, I feel so fortunate to have had that balance and to have been raised in a time without smartphones and yeah, all of that. I mean, I've written about it and contemplated it a lot because my some of my nieces and nephews have asked me these questions, and other people younger than me have asked, you know, so how did you do certain things? How did you date? How did you communicate? You know, what did you do? I was explaining how I was traveling in Crete when I was 18, and people were like, but how did you get around without a smartphone? And even I can't figure it out. Like, so, well, we had these things called maps, and you know, and somehow we just figured it out. And looking back on it, it seems sort of like, you know, it was sort of like a huge expedition to the North Pole or something in retrospect, you know. But it was yeah, I think that balance is so interesting, and I'm not I am very concerned about the way that kids are being kind of I mean I see it every day, just absolutely addicted to these things. And I think it is very worrying, but I think we will work our way out of it. I can see a backlash already going on. I don't know, you say you work in schools, right, Zach? So I don't know if you were seeing kind of a backlash against that, but there's certainly like a whole movement, and I've heard in America there's a very strong movement in amongst teachers to not allow smartphones in schools, and they're already seeing just the attention span of the kids just go through the roof. Like suddenly they're present, you know. So I think it's something that can, you know, we can get back, you know, but I think we have to be very, like Dave was saying, we have to be, you know, we have to be really discerning. It's so important to be really discerning. And again, it's like, I think I used to have this idea that technology was neutral, and I don't think that is true at all. It's very clearly not true. Certain technologies are not neutral. You know, the medium is the message, and so, you know, we have the consciousness. We have to stay conscious, right? We have to stay aware, and aware of the effects that these things are having on us and our children. I think it's really important. And then to to feel that we actually have the right to say no to things that just don't feel comfortable, you know. And I think that's absolutely something that I worry that people are kind of losing, that, you know, what that sense of freedom really means, that was that absolute choice of saying, you know, I'm an individual, and I, you know, I don't want to hurt anybody, but I want to have the choice to make choices that feel good for me, and I don't necessarily want to go along with what everybody else is doing. And that seemed to be a really obvious thing in the 90s. That was like kind of just everybody just thought that, and it doesn't seem quite so obvious anymore. So I think we need to really hold on to that. And looking at this book, you know, I mean, looking through this again and being reminded of how open that time was. And if you get that, Dave, you know, like what an open time the 90s were, really. And again, perhaps not even appreciating it at the time because it just seemed normal that we would just operate that way. But just Yeah, just sort of like that having these open-ended conversations and allowing for different points of view and viewing plurality of opinion as something positive and not something threatening.
Mhm.
I really I feel you can tell I feel a bit nostalgic.
Yeah, I find like I see that long conversations aren't comfortable for children, as I remember just talking for long periods of time because that's what you had to do. You know, if
That's right.
the TV wasn't showing the show that you liked, then you talked with whoever was around. And now it's like I feel like maybe the art of conversation is getting lost a little. And so I just, as a teacher, I try to foster that. I do a lot of just having conversations. Just I
That's great.
give the students a topic, turn to the neighbor next to you, and talk about it for a minute or two, you know,
Yeah.
and just the discourse. I think because yeah, I see my kids on screens, and it's I definitely feel like something is being lost. On the other hand, it is a tool, and they know it better than I do. And it's also the kind of thing that allows us to talk together today, even though we're all in different parts of the world.
But just
Yeah.
what you said about the conversation thing is so interesting because going back to when we were talking about Dave and I and how we would sort of riff off each other, like so because we're both quite curious people, and then we would draw things out of each other that and I don't know if this happened to you, Dave, but this happened to me all the time when I was talking to you about something where I'd find myself saying something and I didn't know that I had that idea. Like I was saying it and having the idea at the same time,
Mm,
right? And that's what happens in these kind of peak level conversations, right? Where you're expressing something that you normally wouldn't have expressed if that person hadn't been in front of you,
mm.
right? And so it is I think it's great that you're doing that discourse experiments with the kids to get them to just explore their own minds, you know. Yeah, it's just it's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's especially helpful to have spend time in nature. That for me has always been important to spend time among the redwood trees and in natural environments with just you and your own mind and the natural world around you. But in many of the conversations that Beck and I had over the years, I was always a lot more pro technology than she was,
Yeah,
and still to this day, I'm very optimistic about. I think it's just so wonderful that we can all be in different parts of the world right now and have this conversation. I think it's remarkable. I think the internet has increased our intelligence, our access to information. I think that artificial intelligence is just mind blowing in what it allows us to do and think and where we're going with it. So I think that it requires a great balance. As you're saying, that I think in classrooms, kids should take a break from it, and that we should never lose the wonderful art of conversation. But we're having it right now
that's
because of
true.
technology.
That's
So.
very true. I would probably push back on you about the internet is smarter. I think it might have done for about 5 minutes, but you're talking to somebody who's been writing for a week on a typewriter and not even an electric typewriter. Such an interesting experience. So
Mm.
yeah.
I was thinking it the other day about writing on a typewriter and how sort of in the moment you'd have to be. And like right now, I think we let ourselves make a lot of mistakes because, spell check's going to get it. And
That's
I was
right.
just, I was just thinking about writers. I've been reading a lot of James Joyce. And so I've been thinking about writers who had to write like a book on a
Yeah.
typewriter
Well,
and like,
there's a whole movement amongst writers now, and I suspect it's writers who have at some point written on a typewriter, because
mm,
there's something about the body memory of that for me, because that's when I first started writing. So that is it's very exciting because I feel a little bit like I did when I first started writing. So I think that might have something to do with body memory. But there's all loads of blogs by writers talking about why they are writing, not everything, but writing certain things on typewriters. And it's just amazing because as you say, you have to stay really focused. And because my mind tends to go lots of little different directions, doing it on a computer, it gets just like I have too many options. And so with the typewriter, it just disciplines my mind, and I have to be so disciplined about my thought process and tidy up my thinking. And the other thing is I can't go online and kind of look up a word, which I tend to do with my sort of slight ADHD, which I think we all kind of have. But go, oh, what's the etymology of this and blah, blah, blah. And then 40 minutes later, and I've gone somewhere completely different. So I will make notes to if I want to look up something, and then I'll do that later. So that's been really interesting. At the end of the day, then I'll go and go online and maybe look something up. But just having this completely offline experience, and just the other part of it is that you realize, wow, it's completely private. This is so private. No one is going to see this unless I want them to see it. And that there's something, the ownership of that is so interesting as well. But yeah, I really recommend it to just see what comes out, because I just wrote like more in 1 week than I've written for the last 6 months, even
Yeah,
though it's very slow.
my very first book that I did, Brainchild, I wrote the first half of it on a typewriter, and I got a computer midway through doing the book, and I did really enjoy the tactile process of having a typewriter sitting on my. I used to keep them on my lap, and I'd love to write it with it on my lap and type that way. But what was really remarkable for me though, when I got the computer, was being able to cut and paste, because it was, once I had, typed something out, it was like carving it in stone. And I had to keep retyping things over and over again every time I got an idea to insert this in here or move this here. And for me, it was this incredible amount of freedom to suddenly be able to cut and paste before I printed things out. And, now I don't even print things out anymore in these days. I just transmit things over the internet. So I think it's really the internet that distracts people, but that ability to cut and paste, that to me was a real revolution in being able to write.
What I used to love about type, my dad wrote a lot on a typewriter, and I loved almost the music of it. I would listen to the typewriter, like, and I didn't even know what he was doing, but there was
Right.
like a rhythm to it, and then it had like a
Right.
brrrt and a bing and a tick tick tick, and I was just like, for
It
some
is a
reason, as a
lovely
musician,
sound.
that was like
Yeah.
where my
Yeah.
brain was.
And the great return. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
I've heard there are actually computer programs that bring back that sound when you're typing on a computer.
That's hilarious. So then I was like, so technology too. I always kind of think about like when people have theories of universe that they describe as something we have come up with technological, like there's that we're living in a simulation, or the hologram theory of the universe. And I find it a little, I always stop and I'm like, well, how can we really like describe the universe by calling it something that we made technologically? Like I have a sticking point when it comes to that. Well, what do you both think as far as like
Mm.
theories of universe that tie in technologies that we've created?
Yeah, I think that the present technology always influences how we see ourselves and the world around us. I mean, Freud's initial psychological theories were very much influenced by the hydraulic steam engines and things like that at the time. And when computers came along, we brought along that model onto the brain, and then virtual reality changed our view of reality. And simulation theory, right now, as you mentioned, is one of our views of reality, because that's, we're simulating things on a computer. I don't know that without having a model like that, I think it's hard for us to conceptualize, ourselves and the world around us. So we tend to utilize the models that we're creating. But you're absolutely right. It certainly can't actually be, or certainly couldn't only be any of those things. It's certainly this much more, and it's always a great mystery.
Yeah, I agree with Dave. I think it's just the model that we use. It's like the universe just keeps expanding to our ability to perceive it,
Mm.
through different lenses. So, as the telescopes get more powerful, then the universe gets deeper, right? And so
Right.
it's kind of like that. I think it's just an extension of our own kind of perhaps limited self-awareness, Um, yeah, something
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Switch gears here a little bit. I'd like to, you're both into the psychedelics, and the book talked a lot about psychedelics. I feel like it's changed a lot since then. How do you feel like psychedelic use has changed since either the early 90s or even like,
Oh my goodness. Oh, so dramatically, so dramatically. When we were doing that book, psychedelics were not only criminalized, but demonized and ridiculed and ignored by the mainstream media. It was such a taboo topic. It was something that we kind of like almost had hidden in the book. It was surrounded by all these other questions about quantum physics and the environment and social reform and different things like that. That was sort of, for me, that was one of the hidden messages, was how psychedelics had influenced people. We wanted, at least I wanted to record, for history, how psychedelics, the role they played in people's thought processes, because many people didn't really want to discuss it because of the taboo around it. But since then, I mean, since Rick Strassman's work at the University of New Mexico during the 1990s with DMT, and then MAPS work and the Hefter Foundation, there's just been this incredible renaissance in not only psychedelic research, but in the way that the mainstream media approaches it. People are now microdosing, at their jobs, and even all the mainstream magazines now are treating it with the kind of, I think, respect that it's always deserved. I mean, psychedelic plants are nothing new. They're an ancient part of humanity's evolution. I mean, they've been utilized for so long. They're new to the Western world, but I think that they're essential now, and it's no accident, I think, that they're occurring now when we're in an ecological crisis, because one of the primary things they do is they help to dissolve the boundaries between you and the external world. And what could be more important right now in this ecological crisis that we're facing than for people to increase their sense of awareness, their environmental awareness, to be able to understand that what you do to the environment, you're really doing to yourself.
And I
And I think
think
I,
I think
let me just say,
Dave.
I think that's the most important thing that they do. Beyond all the medical, help with post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, they're being studied for all these different medical reasons right now. But I think nothing is more important than the role they play in raising environmental awareness or
mm,
ecological awareness.
mm,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Beck. I didn't mean to cut you
Well, I
off.
just wanted to say that I think that Dave deserves a lot of credit in this too. Like Dave's been going at this for such a long time, raising awareness, speaking to people, writing books, writing articles, and just continually talking about the role of psychedelics in expanding consciousness and expanding consciousness in intelligence and compassion and in getting in touch with parts of ourselves and the environment. So I think Dave deserves a lot of credit in that, actually.
Well, thank you for that, Beck. Um, I wrote the first mainstream article about psychedelic research in Scientific American in 2008. At the
mm,
time, there was no other, the mainstream media was not covering it, and now, I mean, it's in Cosmopolitan and Good Housekeeping, and the Stephen Colbert Show, and thanks to Michael Pollan, it's really entered into the mainstream collective consciousness.
mhm. Yeah, and so as far as psychedelics and environmental or ecological causes go, I definitely feel like there's a correlation, if not a cause there. Um, on the other hand, it seems like psychedelics don't necessarily go there. Can you touch on that a little bit? Like somebody was mentioning to me the other day that like all the, and I don't know, I don't necessarily like this term, but the tech bros are also doing like a microdosing, and they're in like Silicon Valley. It's huge, and I don't necessarily know that they're into ecological causes or environmental causes, and I wonder if there's something to that.
I
Well,
just think it's funny that you mentioned the tech bros because I was just thinking as you were asking the question, I've been listening to Douglas Rushkoff. You familiar with him? Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and he talks about that, and he says like, yeah, he was kind of excited about the idea of these tech billionaires doing ayahuasca, and maybe it's going to like really turn them on and change their minds and get them to be like more compassionate, more aware. And he goes. Yeah, you just get a tech bro on acid, and what do you get? A tech bro on acid. And they don't change at all. They're just exactly who they are, which is very interesting, right?
I think he
Uh,
calls them non-specific amplifiers, maybe. Is that
yeah, yeah.
somebody used that
I
term?
was going to say that Stanislav Grof, the psychiatric researcher and psychiatrist, that was his term for psychedelics, that they're
Mm, mhm,
non-specific brain amplifiers, and I think they do. They amplify whatever's there, So I mean, they don't necessarily make you better people. They tend to amplify who you are. I mean, we have examples like people like Charles Manson, and it's not like psychedelics universally make you an environmental activist, but there is something to be said about not all psychedelics are the same. Also, that
mhm,
ayahuasca and magic mushrooms, I think, tend to give that message of environmental awareness. Certainly, doing a psychedelic in a natural environment, doing it in nature, doing ayahuasca in the Amazon, like I
mhm,
have, it's very hard not to feel that connection to nature and to feel like nature is an extension of yourself.
mhm,
Um, but you brought up the relationship between LSD and Silicon Valley. I mean, that's we kind of owe the development of the personal computer and the internet to psychedelics, really. Steve Jobs said that one of the five most influential things in his life was taking LSD, and many people who helped to form the internet and who work on artificial intelligence were inspired by their use of LSD. But LSD and other psychedelics don't inherently make people better people or more empathic people or more compassionate people. They tend to make us more of what we already are.
mm, mhm.
I think that's a really, really important point because I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of sort of expectation around this, when people expect to be having these kinds of experiences, and then I think people can get very disappointed when it doesn't pan out that way, and it also doesn't mean that everything that you experience on acid is true, right? But I mean, my experience of it um, was very mixed, and I definitely had my share of the classic bad trips, and but for me, mushrooms were just much more friendly, I guess, and it just always had that kind of that nature spirit part of it. That would just take you on wonderful adventures, and I love that kind of thing. So just it was always enticing you to kind of go a little deeper into the natural world and to connect deeper to that. So I think that's sort of almost the nature of the mushroom spirit, that if you listen to it, that's where it kind of wants you to go. But then, as Dave said, it depends on what you bring to it, right?
Mhm.
So set and setting is very important.
I
Yeah,
go
yeah.
back.
I think there's an intelligence as to mushrooms and to ayahuasca that does dialogue and does speak to you, and is very concerned about our relationship to the natural world.
Yeah, I had a mushroom experience where I felt like the mushrooms told me that sonically that there's something about being in nature, that hearing nature is super good for your nervous system, and that it's like music in a way, and that when you're either on technology or in a closed environment like a house or a building, that the sounds that you're ingesting are not necessarily good for you, but the sounds that you ingest when you're in nature are actually like medicinal for you. And to
Yeah,
combine
yeah,
That is so true, Zach. And I don't know if what's going on with my hearing, because I've heard that your hearing's supposed to get worse as you get older. My hearing seems to have just got like more and more sensitive, to the point where I have to actually protect my ears sometimes. But being in nature, as you say, I'm very fortunate that I live in a beautiful rural town in France, and there's lovely walks. And in the mornings, especially now that the summer's getting underway, and the bird song is just incredible in the morning. And it feels like it's sometimes I just sit there. I sit on this bench in the middle of my walk, and I just close my eyes and I listen to the bird song, and it feels like it's tuning me, it's just like an instrument, and I'm being tuned by the sounds of these birds.
Mm,
And I was thinking, is it, have I never really paid attention to birdsong my whole life? It's just incredible, and I've become so sensitive to birdsong. So
mm,
it's so interesting that you bring that up, because it just feels really healing, like something is really happening. And it's so delightful. It feels
mm,
absolutely lovely. And I think you're absolutely right. Like when we deprive ourselves of these, we have no idea, I think, really, that the effect that nature is having on us. I think there's all kinds of things going on when we're out in the natural world that we just haven't measured yet. I mean, I think there's all kinds of wavelengths that we're getting exposed to, the colors, the smells, the sounds, all of it. I think there's definitely stuff happening with trees, bodies
mm,
of water. It's just it's when you're just lying down next to a riverbank on a warm sunny day, there's something so healing about that. It's
yeah,
just lovely. I mean, it sounds so obvious, but I think it's so rare to see anyone doing that.
mhm,
It's so interesting. It's like people have to have a dog to walk, or they're jogging, but you rarely see somebody actually just walking.
mhm,
It's you have to be doing something else.
mhm,
yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
when Beck and I had some of our mushroom trips back when we were doing Mavericks of the Mind, she was living in a small cabin up Last Chance Road that was so far out and immersed in nature and so far away from the rest of the world. I don't even think he had running water. He had to walk to a
No,
telephone,
I did have
you know.
running water,
Okay, he
Dave.
had running water.
I didn't
Okay,
have electricity.
no electricity, right? Okay,
I
and
had
and
this kerosene lamps that stank. Yeah.
and she had to walk to the telephone. I had to call her on this. I couldn't
Yeah,
even call her during
it
the
was in the forest.
right, right, right.
That's
So
right. And we had a
and
few
it
trips out there that were wild. I
one
mean,
that were wonderful. I mean, it was
yeah,
so
they were
beautiful,
absolutely
so
wild.
wonderful, so magical, so beautiful.
Yeah.
But but I did want to add though that I do think in terms of whether psychedelics can really change the world, whether they make people better people or more empathic. I think if someone starts out and they're a sociopath, it usually doesn't help. I mean, it usually makes them more of a sociopath. It kind of amplifies what they are. But I do think that most people are good people. I think most people in the world are good people. So if you amplify the human spirit in general, I think that it does help to improve our plight on planet Earth.
mm. I like that point for sure. Yeah, the outliers. I have that optimistic view. I also wanted to bring in optimism because I feel like that was a part of the book that I really gravitated towards. There seemed to be a lot of hope and a lot of optimism, even though
Yeah,
probably through most of the last 100 years, it's also been pretty bleak. But like Robert Anton Wilson would talk about anger and optimism, that Yes, there is some anger because definitely there's some horrific things happening for sure, but there's also the hope and the optimism that we can, figure some of it out at least and help each other, you know.
Yeah, I think there's always the universe is yin yang. I think there's always a balance actually of dark and light, and that we tend to focus more on there's an infinite amount of both, I think. So where you put your focus is what you tend to
Mm,
see. And I think also as you age, most people their pessimism grows, and when they're young, they tend to be more optimistic. I think that's a very common trajectory that most people are on. But I think that as Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary, who both had a huge influence on my philosophy, I think they chose optimism. Not that they saw it as being one more truthful than the other, but by choosing optimism, you're helping to spread
mm.
positive influence in the world. It's
I
also
think
more
they
fun.
prac Yeah, I think it was a practice even, like they chose to practice like
Yeah,
every day do a little bit more and
Yeah, I
yeah.
do. I agree with that. I think for me, I choose optimism almost like a moral duty.
mm,
And it almost feels kind of rebellious, to just insist on being optimistic. Dave was always the more optimistic of the two of us in terms of sort of the future of humanity. And I was always the one who would be like, well, you know, and I always push back a little bit on that. But I think deep down I've always gravitated to optimism. Ultimately, and I think at this point in my life, it's like I'm stubbornly optimistic
mm,
because it's just, yeah, because the alternative is just, I've tried that and it's just, it doesn't work. Yeah, and it
mm.
doesn't make anyone a happier person. So yeah, why not?
Well, so
Well,
not to bring karma back around again, but I loved the conversations that you had in the book about what might happen to consciousness upon death. And if you could touch on that a little bit, I'd love to go there.
yeah, sure. Well, it's certainly something that I think about all the time as a result of having a psychedelic experience is kind of a death rebirth experience. And I've personally had many out of body experiences and things that lead me to feel like I'm getting previews of what happens after you die. Um, as you mentioned, something we asked everybody about in Mavericks of the Mind, and in our follow-up book, Voices from the Edge. And it's something that I've continued throughout my interview career. It's something that I've asked almost everyone that I've interviewed what they think happens to consciousness after death. And I think that the conventional responses, heaven and hell, reincarnation, or nothingness, are very they really limit the imagination. I think there's a lot more possibilities than that. And um and I think that it's that the fear of death is what keeps people from really being able to imagine what
Mm,
happens to consciousness after death. But personally, what do I suspect? I mean, I change my mind all the time. I don't have a fixed belief about what happens to consciousness after death, but I suspect, because I think the universe is composed of consciousness, that your consciousness continues in some form or another. My our Nina Greboy, our wonderful friend, who Beck and I used to go visit every time after we had a psychedelic experience. We would go see her the next morning and talk to her. And she had a very strong belief that consciousness survives death. And we used to get into a lot of philosophical conversations about this, me and Nina. And you know, my position was that that after you die, it's like a drop of water returning to the ocean. That you just you lose all your individuality and you just become part of the universal mind again. The source consciousness, and you just return to that. And like kind of like the peak of an LSD trip. And Nina would always respond by saying, "Well, there is that, but there's all these in between layers, where you retain some aspects of your individuality." And remarkably, after Nina died, I had this experience where I was in Colorado, and I was visiting some friends, and they had gone to sleep, and I was lying there writing in my journal, and I'm thinking to myself, and I was thinking, well, if I should first say that one of the things Nina used to always say is that she referred to her body as a spacesuit, she just, after she died, she would just go from one spacesuit to another, and that was the reincarnation process. And after Nina died, I was sitting writing in my journal, and I was thinking about, oh, I bet you when Nina died, she probably thought to herself, "Oh, I see. David J. Brown is right. You do just, you do just return to the universal consciousness." And as I'm thinking this in this kind of egotistical way, I look up in the TV screen, which is kind of playing in the background. There's just two words on it, and those words are spacesuit. And it
Oh,
just like
fantastic.
this like shiver went up my spine, and I was like,
Mm,
oh my goodness, it was the most direct communication I've ever felt with someone after
mm,
they died. And Nina always said that she would try to find a way to communicate with me if she could after she died. And that was just like, whoa, what powerful confirmation that was. And I get chills
mm,
just repeating
I
that
just got
story.
chills when you said that.
Right. And then even more remarkably, though, is that I've been contacted in the past year by a psychotherapist who believes that he's in contact with a little girl who he thinks is the reincarnation of Nina. So it's like I feel like Nina has found a way to continue to show me, like, see, David, it's just a spacesuit, and you do
mm.
go on. So yeah, it's something I think about all the time, and I think that psychedelics give you some kind of insight into what happens after we die. But I think it's also the most profound mystery that we face, and I think it's important to face it with bravery and
Mhm,
curiosity.
mhm,
And just thinking about Nina, because she was so much like the psychedelic fairy godmother for me and for many people. And thinking about how so many people, I mean, how many people are actually alive who are in amongst our Mavericks? I don't know how many. I mean,
I think there's seven left out of the
seven
17 that we
left.
interviewed. Yeah,
Yeah, because many were passing away because many of them were quite elderly at the time that David and I interviewed them.
mhm,
So these questions about death were not theoretical for them. This was something that was very real and very present for them. So their answers were so considered, and it was that was a really beautiful exploration to have these these big questions and to be able to explore them with people who thought so deeply and were in sort of the winter of their life often. It was really special. But yeah, I don't know what happens after we die.
yeah.
but
I just
what do you
I
think?
just
What do you
feel like,
think? What do you think, Beck? Come on, tell us.
well,
What do you think?
it's interesting because w- I studied Buddhism for a long time. I took it very seriously. I was very um I practiced it uh, and did a lot of meditation on death. And I remember the Dalai Lama saying in a teaching that from the moment that you're born, that you're dying. And I remember that really hit me somehow. Like it was just found that so powerful. Like the moment you're born, so you look at a tiny little baby that's supposed to represent, the burgeoning of life, and that very moment you're already starting to die, right? The process of death is already in that moment. And so I think for me, I don't find myself thinking so much about what happens after. I'm kind of more like feel like in preparation for the event, if you see what I mean, like
Mhm,
the actual the dive off that high dive board. because I think about it probably I mean, yeah, every day. And
Mhm.
it's something, but not in a necessarily negative way. And this might seem a bit strange, but I feel like I'm quite looking forward to it. Like I used to be very afraid of death, I think, and but that seems to have I mean, I'm sure I will be nervous. I mean, I'm sure I will, but that seems to have fallen away quite substantially. And because I think that just that solvent, just applying solvents in whatever way, whatever practice that you have in your life to the ego on a regular basis, whatever practice that is, and psychedelics could certainly be part of that, but so can different meditation practices um uh and different techniques that working on that solvent, and you just I think actually you kind of learn to die a little bit every day, in a good way. You just sort
Mhm.
of become that drop of water in the ocean. That really works for me. I think it's got to be
Mhm.
something like that. So just finding a way to remember the ocean, to connect with the ocean as much as you can. I think that helps to prepare you. That creates that kind of solvent that you need between your ego and everything else. And
Mhm.
then, then hopefully, it can just be kind of a joyful transition. But yeah, I think I'm really comfortable with the mystery. I'm
Mhm.
really happy with the mystery. Yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah, I'm not sure I want to know
yeah,
until it
yeah, yeah.
happens.
Yeah, I remember hearing a story about someone who said that, that they asked him what they thought happens to consciousness after they die, and they said, "I don't want to know. I don't want to even think about it. I want it to be a surprise when I when,
Mhm.
when I die." I think we can all learn a lot from the way Timothy Leary died. Beck and I interviewed Tim while he was dying, and there was, I mean, a lot of people have tried to die with dignity and respect, when they go through the dying process in kind of a serious way. And I think it was really Tim's stroke of genius to make the dying process fun.
Mhm.
That was really what he tried to do. When people asked him, how he felt about dying, he said he was thrilled and ecstatic to be dying. And,
Mhm.
he really radiated this kind of joy about going into the mystery. And while I can't say that, I'm looking forward to it most of the time. I mean, I do retain some degree of fear around death, despite all my psychedelic experiences where I've had my ego die and where I felt like I gained some kind of insight. I still have an element of fear, as Beck said, like jumping off the high dive, I guess
Yeah.
is a good way to put it. But there also is a part of me that is looking forward to it. There is a part of me that is so curious about what happens and feel like it's, as Ram Dass would say, it's like taking off a tight shoe, I think is the way he phrased it. And I think there may be some truth to that.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
very
I
much.
think if you can settle your accounts,
Mhm.
if you can deal with your regrets, that's going to make it all so much easier. Say the thing that you feel that you need to say. Don't leave unfinished business. Tell the people you love that you love them.
Mhm.
Be true to yourself, and sort of settle your accounts in that sense. And trying to clean up as much karma as you can. I think that's going to be very, very helpful in the final hours.
Mhm. Yeah, I had a spark of intuition at some point in my life that said that things like lucid dreaming and psychedelics and active imagination and purposeful out of body experiences are what is preparing for death, and that there might be a possibility. Like if you think about lucid dreaming, you can be lucid for a while and then it slips.
Hmm.
And that my intuition told me, and obviously none of us know this, is that like on moment of death, you might be able to hold some sort of coherence
Hmm.
and also then might slip into the ocean and into everything. But
Yeah.
that if you maybe the practice of things like lucid dreaming might give you the
Hmm.
wherewithal to try to hold any kind of coherence if you even want to, because you may hold coherence and be like, yeah, that was pretty cool, now I want to slip back into everything.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the goal of Tibetan Buddhism and much of shamanism is that kind of preparation. And I think you're right. When we interviewed Rupert Sheldrake, the British biologist, he said that he thought that that death was like a dream that you can't awaken from, and I think that's apt. I think that practicing lucid dreaming, which is something I've been very interested in, is good preparation for this. And you're right, it's very difficult to maintain your sense of lucidity. If when you're actually in the process, it's so easy to get distracted by the other things that are going on and to forget that everything that's going on is a creation of your own mind. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the whole thing to remember, right? Is that your mind is creating everything.
Mhm.
And Dave,
Hmm.
weren't you telling me, because I'm a little bit jealous of Dave's ability to lucid dream, because I haven't really cracked it yet. But didn't you tell me that you've had dreams where you've actually taught other dream characters, or
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
tried to tell them that they're dreaming?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's and almost all my recent lucid dreams. That's what I find myself doing is
That's
Mhm.
just
teach
wild.
is as I'm teaching the other characters, how to lucid dream. I show them what you need to do. That you one of the techniques, of course, is looking at something written, looking away, and looking back. And
Mhm.
in material reality, the it's consistent what's written on the page. And in a lucid dream or in a dream in general the words morph and change. And I would demonstrate this to people, and I teach people how you can fly, how you can move through solid objects and things like that. So I find myself a teacher in the
Mhm.
dream realm.
That is so
Yeah.
psychedelic ninja stuff. That's just fantastic. I love it.
I love lucid dreaming. I've been practicing it my whole life. It's the subject of one of my more recent books, Dreaming Wide Awake. But Beck and I interviewed Stephen LaBerge when we did Mavericks of the Mind, who was the premier lucid dreaming researcher who really sparked all the public interest in it and all the current research that's going on. And at the time, I didn't even know what that they were, it was through Stephen LaBerge that we learned about techniques for lucid dreaming, how to increase the frequency of doing it. Because it happened to me spontaneously after my first LSD trip when I was 16
Mhm.
years old. I just found myself awake in a dream, but I didn't understand that there were techniques that you can use to increase its probability, and that there were all these wonderful things you can do with it. Once
Mhm.
when people first start lucid dreaming, the first things are flying and sex and engaging and all those kind of playful, wonderful, fun things. And then, with time, there's an evolution where you begin to, work through traumas and begin to discuss, having philosophical discussions with dream characters. And you to understand that there's a whole range of different type of dream characters. Some are kind of robotic and, very simple, and some are complex personalities, and some are like, these wise beings that and then you can converse with the intelligence behind the dream itself, the dreaming mind, which is kind of like the spirit of ayahuasca or the mushroom spirit.
Mhm.
There's like this intelligence that you can talk to that's orchestrating the dream itself, that'll communicate with you not only in English or your native language, but through the symbolic nature of the dream, through what happens in the dreaming experience. And then after that, I guess you find yourself trying to teach other dream characters
Mhm.
how to
Yes,
dream.
Dave, I want you to come in my dream tonight and do that look at the
Yeah,
page thing. Okay. I'm
I'll see.
expecting you.
I'll see you there, Beck. I'll see you there. It's a date.
So these dream characters that you're teaching, what is their response when you give them the techniques?
Well, there's been an evolution of that over time because, initially they were very resistant to the idea. The dream characters, I'd show them, look, you can fly, and like they'd be pulling my legs down, trying to stop me. You can't do that, and no, you shouldn't do that. And of course, this isn't a dream, and they were very resistant. And throughout my life, there's been this evolution where they become more open to it, and they allow me to teach them, and they're like, oh, you're right. Oh my goodness, you can put your hand right through this book, and then we fly together in like flocks through the sky sometimes. So there's been this evolution in the process that, I guess maybe there are different aspects of my own mind, maybe, that I'm
Mm,
confronting, but I think there's different types of dreams. I think, as Beck just mentioned, come to my dream tonight. I think people really do share dreams. I think that it's kind
mhm,
of like how, on your computer, you can, you can just be inside your own computer's memory system, or you can link to the internet and and have this shared kind of experience with all the other people or all the other dreamers.
It
mhm,
just sounds like it'd be a great animated movie, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Somebody's got
yeah,
to make that.
yeah,
mhm.
yeah. Well, there is a wonderful animated movie called Waking Life.
Oh yeah.
Not quite as you're describing, they do go in and discuss all these philosophical ideas, and it is like drifting from one dream state to another throughout the film. It's beautiful film.
Mm, mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love Waking Life. And it's funny that I was going to mention that lucid dreaming, the lucid dreams that I've had. This may say something about my waking life. Those are my favorite memories. Like, to be quite honest, my favorite memories right now are the memories of my lucid dreams. Like, I like them
yeah,
more than, and I have a good life. I'm not saying I have a bad life. I'm just saying that there's something about it that is like,
yeah,
I just love to remember. I love to like
yeah.
sit there and sort of remember those lucid
Oh,
dreams. And then I
yeah,
had one where I brought back music that I had composed with a dream character. We were like jamming on something, and then it was lucid, and so then I was able to like kind of like work over ideas, and then I was able to bring it back, and I still have the song that was written with
yeah.
me and another dream character.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Zach, and that's wonderful to hear. When I was doing my book Dreaming Wide Awake, I did get that from a lot of people that was where they got a lot of their creative inspiration from, ideas for books they were working on, or other things like musical compositions, like you had in your experience. I mean, I find one of the most wonderful things to do in a lucid dream is to just sit and observe. Just to look, and it's just remarkable to look around at the world around you and know that you're in a reality that's being created by your own mind, or to meditate in a lucid dream, just to close your eyes and meditate it. You go into these amazing psychedelic experiences, or going to sleep in a lucid dream and going into a dream within a dream within a dream. I mean, it's so remarkable the experiences that you could have. So I agree. Some of my favorite memories
Mhm.
are from my lucid dream experiences as well.
So then I have a question that's kind of for me, just because. So I'm pretty obsessed with the idea of, or the experience of deja vu, and I just wanted to know, you can say yes or no, if either of you have any stories about deja vu.
Okay, I can go first. Yeah, I mean, I had incredible deja vu experiences when I was living in France. Part of the reason I wanted to go to school in France was because I had this really strong feeling of connection with it. It's interesting that that's where Beck is living right now, because
Mm,
I feel such a connection to France. And when I was there, there was so many streets that I walked down in Dijon and in Paris that I felt like I had been there before. And I've also felt, even though I've never been to India, I felt this strange kind of connection, this familiarity with India as well. I um, I also one time had this, and I'm not sure how it happened, and it's never happened again. But there was this one night where I was like having like a continuous experience of deja vu, where it was like everything seemed familiar, like where every
Mm,
person I saw seemed like they were my brother or something.
mm,
And it was just, it's very hard to describe, but I remember talking to my friend Serena about this, and she told me she had a very similar experience where it's just, it was like one, deja vu experience after another. So, I'm not sure if it's, I've thought about it a lot too. I'm not sure if it's, really because, I've had past lives in these places, or, I have some kind of, ancient connection, or whether it's just some kind of aberration in my brain, because that one night it was like just everything was familiar. So I don't know. It's one of those great mysteries, but I find it interesting as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it happens to me very, very often. But it will be like I'm talking to somebody and I just feel like we've had this conversation before.
Ah, yeah, yeah,
And sometimes I
yes,
say it out
yes,
loud and they just look at me
yeah.
like, oh, like you're not experiencing that. I'm like, are you sure we haven't had this conversation before? And I know that we haven't, but I mean that happens on a very regular basis. But as Dave was talking, it was reminding me that the strongest deja vu experience I've ever had was here in the town that I live in France. It's a it was on the Camino, the old Compostela, Santiago,
mm,
the pilgrimage route that goes through France, but most people go through Spain because it's Santiago, the city where the cathedral is in Spain. And you can go from Portugal, you can go from the Netherlands, you can go from all over. There's routes all over, but there was really major routes through France that would come from the Netherlands and also from England, and the route goes directly through the town. So there's signs for this along the way. It was and it people were walking it for hundreds of years, especially in the Middle Ages. But then that route kind of died out a little bit because nobody has that time to go through France and then through Spain. So the Compostela is mostly famous within Spain and Portugal because most people have like, okay, a month is a long time, right, to give up in your life. But people used to take a year to
mm,
do this pilgrimage, back in the Middle Ages. And I was walking. It's called San Jack, and I was walking along this cobbled street shortly after I had moved to this town, and it was so powerful that it was actually, I have shivers even thinking of it, that it was I had walked the street before in the Middle Ages.
mm,
It was a very, very powerful experience. It was like, and I was absolutely certain that I had walked the street before, and everything just looked so familiar. So that was
mm,
probably the most powerful one that I've had. But also, like Dave was saying, I used to live in India, and that definitely, that was like, it felt very, very familiar. So that's not exactly the same as deja vu, but this feeling of deep familiarity with the culture that I'd never been exposed to, and feeling completely at home, and kind of suddenly, feeling like I sort of understood, the
mm,
cultural norms, which I
Mhm.
never had really, particularly in my childhood. I was kind of
mm,
like, who are these people and what are they doing and what are these knives and forks and things? And like it all felt very, very alien to me, my own culture. So yeah, so I think it can be. Past lives are a very easy way to explain that, right? There's a
mm.
logic to that. So I'll go with that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel like because I've
yeah.
been collecting stories just because I love it, and I feel like precognition and past lives both are heavy like themes in all the stories that I've collected about deja vu.
Yeah, I think related to that is, what Beck was just saying really reminded me of how many times I've spoken to people and they seemed instantly familiar, like I knew them, upon my first meeting. I certainly felt that with Beck, upon our first meeting. And it's like a kind of soul recognition. And
Mm,
a lot of people explain that by saying, "Oh, we had past lives together," and maybe I don't know, but I've certainly experienced that, quite a lot in my life where I've met certain people and they just instantly felt familiar, like I just already knew them on some kind of deep level. And there was this immediate feeling of being comfortable and understanding them. My ex-girlfriend used to also have experiences where, and it happened really, really regularly, where she would talk about how she would say, "Oh my God, what we're experiencing right now, I had in a dream last night." She would like have these, dreams, and the next day we would like be doing what she, described in her dream. And it was just like happening almost on a regular basis. So there's that experience of premonition, I think, is another way of explaining the phenomena.
Yeah, what sparked my whole interest is my daughter's friend had a dream where she saw a man in a red hat yelling at kids. And then, like the next day or two, she was at a swim meet. And at this swim meet, this man in a red hat was yelling at his two kids. And
Oh,
but she remembered the dream when she saw the experience. So it was almost like if deja vu and precognition are like two sides of the same coin, it's like you don't know which one it is. Is it precognition or is it deja vu?
right. Right, right. Yeah, that's the nature of a lot of things with psychic experiences. It's hard to know whether it's telepathy or precognition or clairvoyance, like, because there's an interesting kind of overlap, and psychic researchers have a really hard time teasing them apart.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Is there, so we've covered a lot. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to cover?
Hmm. I mean, not really. We've kind of really discussed a lot. It's been wonderful to have this reunion. Beck and I haven't had done an event together or something like this in decades, really. We
Yeah,
did
it was a
we
long time ago. We were
you
so
know
young. We look at the photos of us back then, and I was like, wow, you're just so young and innocent. And yeah, it was so wonderful. It was such a great adventure, the whole thing. And
yeah,
yeah, it was a joy, and it's so and you guys at Hilaritas Press did such a fantastic job, and Rasa and Christina was so wonderful and so careful about everything, and the cover is just so beautiful. I love it. I love everything about
Mhm.
it, and it's I didn't realize quite how thick it was, but it is quite a tome. It's turned out to be with all the
yeah.
additions. Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
and
much thicker than the original, actually, because we've added each edition has new introductions to it, and
Mm.
we also added the transcripts from the roundtable discussion that we did at
Right,
UC
from the
Santa Cruz, and
discussions. And
yeah,
it's just so, I never would have imagined at the time that, we'd be sitting discussing it. Like, what is it, 35 years? I'm trying to figure out
yeah,
how I can't do the math. But it's a long time. And that would go into a third edition. And it makes me really pleased to think that a younger generation hopefully will be picking this up and getting exposed to these ideas because
Mhm.
we this we need elders in our society, right? We need to talk to people who've been around for a while and have a few things under their belt. And that was such a joy for me. I've always really enjoyed being around older people, and now I'm pretty old myself. And I still enjoy being around older people, and I just there's just something so calming to me about their presence, and so yeah, it was such an honor and such a joy, and I'm so happy to be able to continue to share it.
Well, I feel super grateful to be here with the two of you and to be able to do this, to be a part of this. I feel very grateful, and so I appreciate it. Rebecca, what are you working on now? Where are you going from here? Do you have anything in?
Well, just thank you, Zach, for organizing this. Thank you very, very much. I'm actually really would like to. I've been doing a lot of kind of just sort of taking care of business survival stuff that hasn't been inspiring me lately. And but I think I'm on the on the verge of a kind of a big life change, and so I'm really would like to just focus on writing. It's where somehow I've had sort of writer's block for about 30 years or something, and I think I'm finally working. Maybe it's the typewriter. The typewriter seems to be able to like punch through my writer's block. So I'm just yeah, but having something to say, right? So it's this, I think I'm finally finding my voice after a very long time. I've realized what I don't want to write about, and that's been important. Although I am interested in so many things, but yeah, just following that calling, I think is what I can imagine myself doing for the next foreseeable future.
David, I know you're always into a few different things. What do you got coming up?
Well, right now, I mean, my book, The Illustrated Field Guide to the DMT Entities, was just published. So I've been doing a lot of promotional work with that. I've been doing a lot of podcasts, and I have a lot more that I've been doing with that. And the artist that I did that book with, Sarah Finn Huntley, and I are currently working on an oracle deck that's
Mm,
based on the artwork from that book and the an interdimensional oracle to communicate with the DMT entities. And I'm also working on a book about whether artificial intelligence can become sentient, and
mm.
my conversations with my AI assistant about it. And I'm also working on another book that's collecting together all my psychedelic adventures throughout my life, all the stories that we mentioned earlier, that some of which have been scary and terrifying at the time, but are now funny and inspiring when I think back to them. So I've been working on that, and yeah, and
Yeah.
always looking towards the frontier. So,
I have to say I'm a big fan of the, is it Luna? That's the one where where you've been
yeah,
posting the,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I find those to be fascinating.
fascinating.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
I kind of look
yeah.
forward to when you put those out because I'm like, I love these.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I find them fascinating as well. I think it's naive to think that computer intelligence can't become aware and sentient. I think it's like the way people have been prejudiced against whether animals can be conscious. I think that if
Mm.
the way people have communicated through Ouija boards and through spirit communications and things like that, I see no reason why they couldn't use a silicon-based computer for spirits to communicate with us. So anyway, I'm exploring that idea.
Love it. I love it. Well, I am very grateful and thank you. I've loved this conversation and yeah, I really appreciate it.
It's been great fun. Yeah, let's do it again sometime. It's been really
Thanks so
great
much,
fun.
Zach.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Bye.
you.
Zach. Thank you,
Bye.
Zach. Thank you,
Thank you.
Beck. See you.
Cheers. Thanks, Dave. Come and meet me in my dream.
I will. I will. I'll
I'll
see
be
you there.
waiting.
I'll
Could we
see you
do
there.
like a
See you
virtual
there.
dream? Well, three of us. It's like Zoom, but organic.
Yes, let's do
Let's
that.
make it
We'll all meet
happen.
there.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Bye.
Peace.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to David and Beck for taking the time with chat, and to Zach for hosting. Thank you, as always, to the Robert Anton Wilson Trust and to Richard Ross of Hilaritas Press for editing and production. Our next episode will release as usual on the 23rd, and until then, I am your host, Mike Gathers, signing off with love and cheerfulness. Amor et Hilaritas.
Hilaritas.